Greetings, fellow Gorehounds, and welcome back to a Blood Splattered vlog. I'm the Horror Guru.
And I'm Count Jackula.
And happy Pride Month! Today we are going to talk about I Saw the TV Glow.
Oh, yes.
From writer-director Jane Schoenbrun, who is a trans filmmaker, and I'm not just saying that because it's Pride Month, it's actually very relevant to our discussion about this movie. I want to also mention that this movie is an A24 film, so it is a surrealist art house horror movie. If you're not into those, then this movie's definitely not going to be for you, but I figured I'd warn you right up front. The movie follows two people, Owen and Maddie, starting from their childhoods and then goes a little bit into their elder age.
Yeah, their adulthood.
There's a little bit of a cradle to grave thing happening here, kind of. And it's about these two friends who are equally obsessed with this TV show called The Pink Opaque.
Yeah, this is the thing they care about. They're young teenagers. They feel like they've got nothing else going for them but this show.
They're very lonely outcasts.
Yeah, very lonely outcasts.
They're socially awkward on a good day.
Yeah.
They both struggle with their equally awful parents. Though Owen does have a pretty good mom, he has a pretty terrible dad.
Yeah.
Maddie, as far as we're aware, has a terrible dad. And they're both pretty abusive, the dads in this equation.
Yeah, one of the funny things is that the main dad is played by Limp Bizkit.
Yes, Fred Durst, which I didn't realize he was in this movie until the credits, and then I saw his name and I'm like, Frank? Who's Frank? Oh, Frank is the dad. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Considering the dad in this movie kind of represents the epitome of toxic masculinity, perfect casting, actually.
Yeah. And one of the reasons it really got by us is that you never really see the dad face on.
No.
He's more of a menacing presence.
Yeah, he's always looming inside that house.
Yeah.
Even if he's not on screen. Just something like a simple noise in the other room will cause the main character, Owen, to just turn off his TV so he doesn't see him watching the girly show, The Pink Opaque.
Yeah.
The Pink Opaque in the show is obviously an amalgamation of a couple things, but the main thing it's homaging is Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yes.
In particular, the relationship between Willow and Tara in that show. It's about two friends who live on the other side of town who share a psychic link and fight monsters together, but there's a very obvious lesbian overtone to their relationship. They are more than just BFFs. So that's where like the Buffy the Vampire Slayer kind of influence comes in, but you can also see influence from shows like Charmed, Goosebumps. There's a little bit of Eerie, Indiana in the show.
Think like Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Are You Afraid of the Dark, and you're pretty much there.
Yeah. You smash those two together, you're there. You're there pretty much. Secret World of Alice and Mac was another show I thought of when they were showing some clips from it.
Yeah, that was a little after my time, but I know of it.
You know what I mean, yeah. That's the other thing about this movie is that it starts off in the 90s, so it's kind of steeped in 90s nostalgia as a result of that.
Mid to late 90s and then goes up until like present day.
And reading a lot of analyses of this film, it's very obvious that the 90s nostalgia took over a lot of people's interpretation of this film, but I feel like focusing on the nostalgia aspect of the movie is kind of missing the forest through the trees.
Yeah.
Because what this movie's actually about is it's an allegory for the trans experience.
Yeah.
Now, unfortunately, I can't go too into detail as to how it's an allegory for the trans experience because that pretty much requires me to go into the spoilers that happen in the second half of this movie.
Yeah, and just to be clear, if you go in blind, that in and of itself is a bit of a spoiler, but that's the kind of spoiler you probably want us to tell you about.
Yeah, and because this movie's been out for a couple months now, I feel comfortable talking about that part up front, but I'm not going to spoil the second act twist.
Correct.
Until we get to the spoiler section.
That's a huge one. But like, until you get there, you're pretty sure that Maddie is queer of some type, but up until a certain point, you're thinking that the Justice Smith character, the main character, you're not sure about them because they could be heterosexual but autistic.
There is a point early on in the movie where they have a conversation and Maddie mentions that she's into women.
Yeah.
So you can kind of assume that she's a lesbian. When he talks about it, he just talks about this hole inside of him, this empty hole that cannot be filled, and he knows that it's empty, and he knows that something's wrong with him, but he doesn't know why that is.
Yeah, and until the movie gets to a certain point, you aren't sure what that hole is. I found myself going, no, it's really important that this is ambiguous in the beginning because a lot of trans people have the issue of not being able to admit it to themselves for one reason or another.
Yeah.
Usually because of societal pressure.
Which is an important part of this movie.
Big part of this movie.
Without getting into the details, without getting into the spoilers, this character is presented with the opportunity multiple times to be true to themselves and just completely bolts. Anxiety hits and they just can't take the leap of faith that they need to take in order to be their true selves. That is partially how this movie kind of reflects the trans experience, in particular, the closeted trans experience. Someone who is trans either hasn't realized it yet or at least hasn't admitted to themselves that that's the case yet.
Yeah.
And that's where the character of Owen is for a majority of this movie. I will say, without getting into spoilers, the movie has an ending that at first came across as a bit ambiguous to me, but after watching the movie multiple times, I actually have a very clear interpretation of it now.
Yeah, me too.
I also see how some people might interpret it another way. You can either interpret it as a tragedy or you can interpret it as a hopeful reawakening. From my perspective, it's more of a reawakening. I go with the more hopeful interpretation. And the more I rewatch the movie, the more that interpretation is reinforced because the more details that I missed the first time around, I start to pick up on. Part of the reason why some of those details you don't really pick up on the first time around necessarily is because some of those things are like answers to questions that you get before you get the question. So you don't know to be questioning that until the question's brought up, but by then they've actually already answered the question and you don't realize it.
Yeah, because what this movie is really about, it's really about raw emotions.
Yes.
It's about raw feelings. The manifestation of them, even to ourselves, is not rational. They're not logical. They don't follow a straight up progression.
The overall tone of the movie is very melancholic and lonely.
Yes.
There are more harsher emotions later on in the movie, but that's the primary one that kind of drives most of it.
Yeah, yeah. It reminded me a lot of being like, you know, a teenager where I grew up and just being out at night alone.
Yeah.
You know, like just hanging out at like the playground that I used to go to when I was like in elementary school and just like being there. There's no one else around and just going like, I don't entirely know why I'm doing this, but you know, it has that same feeling to it.
Yeah, I could totally see that.
You know,
where I related to the movie, I didn't necessarily relate to the movie on the trans level, but I did relate to the movie on the level of being an awkward, lonely kid who's obsessed with a TV show. Because as a kid, I was awkward, I was lonely, I was also the fat kid, which, you know, can get you ostracized in certain circles. But I watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer, I watched Charmed, I watched every single show that this show is mimicking.
Yeah.
So I can relate to it on that level of like watching this show that allows you to escape the awful existence that you're living in and gives you this glimmer of joy in just this sea of depression.
Yes.
On that level, I can relate to it. But I do think if that's as far as you go with this movie, you are missing some of the finer details.
Oh, yeah, yeah, because that's really the commonality. That's the commonality that being trans has with all of these other things, which is that level of isolation, particularly like feeling like that isolation might be total.
Yeah,
You know?
absolutely.
And if you could just do thing, everything would be okay. And as they say in Inherit the Wind, all the little doors and all the little houses will open and they'll say, come on in.
Yes.
You know, like, oh.
One of the metaphors I really like in this movie is one of their metaphors for what it feels like to be just so closeted is suffocating.
Oh, yeah.
The theme of suffocation happens a lot in this movie in multiple ways, not the least of which being at the beginning of the movie, the main character Owen is established as being asthmatic. He carries an inhaler around all the time. So he's constantly, like, when he has a panic attack or anything, having like a wheezing fit.
Yeah.
So he's suffocating literally. Just his natural existence is suffocation.
Yeah.
That metaphor gets deeper and deeper, which will also be really funny when you get to the spoiler section. But that metaphor gets deeper and deeper as the movie goes on. And I do think that there's going to be a lot of people who watch this movie and are going to discover for themselves that they're trans.
Oh,
by watching this movie.
Absolutely.
I've already seen some people on social media talking about that happening to them. Just to warn any of you viewers out there, you might watch this movie and discover you are trans, maybe even possibly queer, given that Maddie is more about the lesbian experience than the trans experience. But
yeah, but she's definitely like, she is the character that ventures beyond the border first.
Yeah.
You know, she is the one that had either the balls or the naivete or the whatever to actually cross into the Outlands.
She's also a archetype that pops up in a lot of queer stories for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
And that's the elder queer.
Yep.
Who, even if they're only a couple steps ahead of the main character, that's enough steps to help guide the main character through the path.
Yeah, because that first step, that's the threshold.
Yeah.
That's the threshold.
She's like his queer Morpheus, for lack of a better way of putting it.
Yeah, she is. Yeah, she fulfills the same role because her whole thing is that same thing in The Matrix where it's like, Neo, I want to tell you about the Matrix.
Yeah.
You know? I need to tell you about this other world that is out there. You know?
Part of the reason why I bring up Morpheus is because that is a movie made by two trans women who later in life admitted that the movie was partially a trans metaphor. Now, so far we mainly talked about the metaphor of the movie. The stuff that literally happens in this movie, there's some body horror at one point, which I think you probably figured when I told you this was a trans allegory that there was going to be some body horror that happens, because how do you depict body dysmorphia?
Yeah, exactly. if you're going to actually try to depict body dysmorphia, you've automatically crossed into body horror.
Exactly. There's also a lot of cool, like, monster effects, particularly when they show you scenes from the TV show they watch.
Yeah.
And some of the monster effects made me really wish the TV show was real.
Yes.
Because I'm just like, holy shit, I want to see that. I want to see it in all its cheesy 90s glory.
There was actually another show that it kind of reminded me of, but I'm like, look, me and 5 other people saw this damn thing.
Yeah.
It was called Dead at 21.
Oh, wow. That's a deep cut.
Yeah. Dead at 21, it was an MTV show. I think it only had like 8 episodes or something like that.
Okay.
The whole setup was, there's a group of kids who are going to die the minute they turn 21, but they have psychic superpowers. You know, and when I think back on it, I'm like, yeah, there's probably some queer allegory going on in that show as well. I think about it.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely. One thing that I do not feel bad spoiling, because it happens in like one of the first scenes in the movie, really, is one of the ways the movie kind of signals to you that this is a queer story about the queer experience on some level is one of the first images you see of the main character is them in a gym with fellow students doing that thing that some PE classes sometimes did, where they would have you like roll out this giant parachute and fling it into the air, and then you dive underneath it and create like a little like igloo. They do that in this movie, and when he goes underneath it, it's all queer flag colors.
Yeah.
So the movie is signaling to you right off the bat that this character falls under the queer umbrella.
Yeah. I don't know. That was pretty awesome. Yeah.
So that's the kind of metaphorical, but also kind of in-your-face storytelling that's throughout this movie.
Yeah.
But it also gets really surreal, and I would love to explain to you how it gets surreal. But before we do that, we need to tell you that this movie is currently available on various streaming platforms to rent or to buy. I highly recommend you do if you like A24 films, if you like LGBT allegory films, if you like art house surreal horror films, then this is a must-see, and it's one of the best movies I've seen this year, so there's my endorsement.
Yeah. The production is a little cheap.
Yep.
But that
kind of adds to what it's doing.
It does. It actually adds to what it's doing. This is also the second film by this filmmaker.
Yeah, they also did We're All Going to the World's Fair.
All Going to the World's Fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, which, unlike that movie, which I felt was way too ambiguous as to what it was even talking about.
Yeah.
This one is just ambiguous enough. This is a quantum jump in artistic improvement.
My feelings on that movie versus this movie is everything that I had a problem with that movie is improved in this movie.
Yeah.
And everything I liked about that movie remains in this movie.
Yeah, I agree.
Mastery of tone in that movie exists in this movie.
Yeah. Also, the things that were best because they were ambiguous.
Yes. What I kind of liken it to is All the World's Fair is a demo tape, but this is a full album.
Yes. That's a good way of putting it.
And because of that, I look forward to whatever Jane makes next.
Oh, yeah.
Which I hear might be a sequel to this, which, given the way this movie ends, I'm interested in seeing how that turns out.
I won't say anything more because it's spoilers.
Yeah. And with that said, let us move on to the spoilers. Okay, so the big spoiler for this movie is that halfway into this movie, it's revealed that the Pink Opaque is not a TV show.
Yeah.
It's real. It's a whole nother reality. And our main characters, Owen and Maddie, are from that reality. In fact, they're the stars of that reality.
Yeah, yeah. They are the people that those characters are based on.
Yes. Maddie is one of the girls in that duo, and Owen is the other girl in that duo. In this reality, he's been stripped of his true identity, which was intended to suffocate him.
Yes.
He's essentially existing in the trans/queer sunken place.
Yes.
That's where he's been sent by the villain of that alternate reality. And Maddie ventures off on her own into that reality, discovers who she truly is, and comes back to get Owen and to take him on that journey.
Yeah.
What if I told you?
Yeah. Very Morpheus.
Yeah.
Orpheus. It's Moses.
It's like if the Matrix trans allegory was way more in your face.
Yeah.
But Owen can't take that leap yet, so he runs away again. He's been running away the entire movie every time Maddie's given him an opportunity to take the steps on his journey. Now, some of you may have watched this movie and thought that whether or not that reality was real was more ambiguous. I disagree.
Yeah. Well, it's intended to feel ambiguous because there is no proof of what Maddie is saying.
Except
Yeah.
for one really big thing that I noticed the third time I watched the movie.
Oh.
When Maddie is telling Owen about her journey into that reality and about the fact that the reality is real.
Yeah.
Where is she telling him that initially?
Oh, at the club.
At the club. At that bar.
Yeah.
Which shares the same name as the bar in the show. That name is displayed twice in the background.
Yeah.
When they're in that bar. Kind of signaling to you, the viewer, if you notice it, that, oh shit, he's on the cusp of both realities.
Yeah. He's right there. He's on the precipice, on the threshold.
Yeah.
You know?
This is where those two realities meet. This is where the barrier is thin enough that she can cross over.
The obvious queer bar. That's the threshold, baby. Right
Absolutely.
there. That's
Absolutely.
the Mos Eisley of this world. Yeah.
And that, along with some other clues throughout the movie, indicate to me that she's not lying. This is true. Yeah. But you're probably wondering, if you haven't watched the movie yet, well, shouldn't I know if the reality is 100% real if I saw the movie? Like, what happens at the end of this movie? So, after Owen runs away from Maddie, we jump forward a couple years. And by a couple years, I mean like 20 years.
Yeah.
He has gained a family. We never see the family, but he's gained a family.
Yeah.
He's got a job, a dead-end job. It's the second dead-end job we've seen him have in the movie, and it's obvious it doesn't bring him any joy. He basically works at a glorified Chuck E. Cheese.
Yeah, which would be okay if he wanted to be there, but now, he's just kind of there because he has nowhere else to go.
Yes, but during one child's birthday party where he's, doing the happy birthday thing with the hat and everything for the kid, he has a complete and utter existential mental breakdown. And when he does, reality itself around him seems to just freeze.
Yeah.
No one looks at him, no one speaks, everyone just freezes in place like they're fucking Westworld robots.
Yeah.
That were turned off.
Yeah, so you're not sure whether this is... You know that the feeling is real.
Yeah.
But you don't know whether he actually did that or whether that was just in his head, what was going through his mind.
So he starts screaming. He screams for his mom. He screams that he's suffocating. He screams that he can't do this anymore. And one of the things you might notice if you pay attention to this scene, I especially noticed in my subsequent viewings, despite the fact that this is supposed to be 20 years later and he looks like it's 20 years later, like everything's grayer.
Yeah.
He's got wrinkles.
They did him up and...
Everyone else looks the same age.
Yep.
Like it's actually just been a year, but to him it was 20 years.
Yeah.
Which is something that Maddie mentioned, that time is going to slowly progress faster for you. The show ended with the two main characters being buried alive by the bad guy. It was a cliffhanger ending and then the show was canceled. In that reality, the main character is buried underground, suffocating.
Yeah, it's literally
They're literally suffocating. And in this scene, the character in the sunken place reality, for lack of a better way of putting it, now reached the point where they just can't breathe anymore.
Yeah.
They're literally suffocating. And And they go to the bathroom. And earlier on in the movie, he mentioned inside of him there's like this empty hole, and he's afraid to look inside to see what's there or what isn't there.
Yeah.
He pulls out a knife, and we get to see him literally tear himself open, pull open his chest to reveal the TV show inside.
Yeah, he is filled with light, and that light is the television
His
show.
true self 100% resides in that reality, is basically what this is telling you.
Yeah.
Then he closes it back up, goes outside, apologizes to everyone for making a scene, walks off screen.
Yeah, and he apologizes, but no one acknowledges him.
No, it's like no one cares.
Yeah.
No one sees him. He's invisible.
Yep.
That's where the movie ends. You could look at it like a tragedy, like saw his true self, closed it up, went outside, and then started apologizing for it. Like you could see it as him once again running away. However, I actually disagree with that interpretation for a couple reasons. The main one being, when Maddie earlier in the movie, when they're inside that dome, that planetarium,
Yeah.
and she's explaining how she crossed over into the other reality and found her true self, she talks about her experience and how she had to bury herself alive again. And then she first started to suffocate. And then she started screaming and clawing.
Yeah.
And then she started apologizing.
Yeah.
And then eventually saw herself like an out-of-body experience.
Yeah.
And warped into the other world.
Yeah.
And started season 6 of the show.
Yeah, and she literally says that. Season 6 is just over there.
Yeah. So at the end of this movie, what does he do? He screams.
Yeah.
He cuts himself open, sees that the show is potentially there, goes outside and starts apologizing.
Yeah. While he is crying and stumbling as if he has been born new into the world.
And he is seemingly walking towards the exit. You can't see it, but you can assume that's where he's going off screen.
Yeah.
I interpret it as he has just finally started his journey.
Yeah, that was my interpretation as well.
Imagine it's the Matrix, and throughout the entire movie, Neo has decided to reject taking the pill.
Yeah.
And has decided to go back to his reality. And then at the end of the movie, finally takes the pill.
Yeah. That's when he finally like takes the pill and is like realizes he's in that pod. That's where this movie ends.
But at this point in the movie, he's got to find the pill himself because Maddie's gone.
Right.
I understand how many people can take the more tragic ending.
Yeah,
for
more
this.
pessimistic version.
I get it. It makes sense. I don't think that is what the movie's actually trying to do. There's a lot more that goes on in this movie, and there's a lot of really fun details that I could point out, but I kind of want you to experience the movie for yourself.
It's a gem.
Yeah.
It really is a gem.
If you're trans, you'll probably relate to it hardcore. If you're not trans, you'll probably be able to relate better to a trans person by the end of the story.
Yeah, which I think ultimately is part of the ultimate point of the film. This is an artist taking pain and revealing it to the world in the hopes that it will reach the people that it will reach by taking that ultimate terrifying step of revealing so much of yourself that empathy can be created.
It also has a banging ass soundtrack. The soundtrack is fucking awesome. And a good half of the songs were actually written for the movie, which makes it even better.
Yeah.
Each song kind of feels like the kind of song you would have heard when they were in the Bronze and Buffy.
Oh, yeah, totally.
That same kind of like girl-themed indie rock / punk stuff going on.
Yeah, the indie punk, like Riot Girl, almost shoegazy.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely immediately after this went to Spotify to see if I could find the soundtrack because I love the songs in this so much.
Oh, yeah.
Especially the 2 songs when they're in the bar.
Yes.
Those 2 songs are really good. One of which literally says the line, "I saw the TV glow." So I know that
was written for the movie.
That was written for the movie.
Yeah.
And I believe that's the Phoebe Bridgers one. So.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, my fellow Gorehounds, I Saw the TV Glow is a masterpiece of a film that I think everyone should experience, but it will not be for everyone. I must stress that. It is so unique to a specific experience. It is so fucking weird. I guarantee there's a lot of people who are going to watch this movie and have no idea what to do with it.
Yeah.
But I hope, given our discussion on the movie here, that you'll at least come away with a deeper appreciation for the movie, understanding a little more of what it's saying. Anyway, my fellow Gorehounds, once again, happy Pride Month to all of you, and where can they find you, Count Jackula?
Oh, you can find me here on YouTube every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at about 7 p.m. when I live stream, and then on Tuesday and Thursday, I live stream on Twitch. I also have a Twitter, which is Counting Jack. I have a Blue Sky that is Count Jackula at Blue Sky or whatever. Just go on Blue Sky, look for Count Jackula. You'll probably find it. It's got a little cartoon image of me with a red mohawk going, "Run, the future is fucked." What about you?
Y'all know me. I'm the Horror Guru. You can find me at the Horror Guru on Twitter, on Twitch, Instagram, Facebook, wherever. Just look up the Horror Guru or Blood Splattered Cinema, and I'll be there. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and don't forget to ring that notification bell so you're notified of my videos immediately upon their upload. And if you'd like to help out either of us more directly, be sure to check out our Patreon pages. And remember, if you decide to go the Patreon route, even $1 a month can go a long way. And if you made it this far into the video, then I want you to comment below, and be sure to comment below using the hashtag PinkOpaque, because honestly, I can't think of a better hashtag for this. So use the hashtag PinkOpaque, that way I know, that way Jack knows, that way the whole world knows that you have a new 90s nostalgic TV show to obsess over. And with that said, my fellow Gorehounds, peace out, and I'll catch y'all later.